All right, and just like that, we're back. And I feel like we've just gotten started. I have a long list of topics in my head, and we've just scratched the surface. I cannot wait to continue, so let's get right to that. This relates to the idea of emergent gameplay, and it's actually sort of a personal question. This question popped into my mind when I was thinking about formative things for you. The first deck that ever became a viral thing, a meme of sorts in the Magic community, but a meme in a good way, was the deck. It was, and actually it propagated on the Usenet, not as a consequence of me going and typing up long articles about it. I had a friend of mine in the Bay Area that posted an article on the Usenet, I think in late 1994, declaring that it was basically the solution to Magic the Gathering. I was given the credit as being its designer, but I play tested it and developed it against, a backdrop of dozens of different people. And figured out exactly how to fine tune it so that, for example, it had 2 Sarah Angels instead of 3 or 1 or 4 or whatever, 2 moats, etc., 2 disrupting scepters. I'm curious to know when that construction fell on your radar, because it was an example of emergent gameplay in the system that you had developed and a coalescing, a consolidation of this idea that the dev team understood that card advantage was the principal strategy in Magic. I'm very curious to know when that design fell on your radar. And how?
I don't remember, but I do remember people talking about it and playing it as being basically the sign that there was some very serious thinking and play going into the game, because there was a lot of noise in the signal back in that day. Now, one of the reasons it wouldn't have affected me much is because very early on I stepped back from Magic in order to work on other games, and in particular, put more flags in this new terrain of trading card game. Magic was clearly going to be something which needed not to be bottlenecked by one designer, and was going to be more work than I could do in any case. And so I trained and empowered a lot of people to take up that mantle.
Yeah, there's so many layers to that, obviously, in terms of the expansions and the card design that came afterward, Arabian Nights, Antiquities, Legends, etc. I wanted to circle back a little bit to some of the debunking stuff, because we hadn't finished all of those off. The next one concerns the exclusion of one of the 10 canonical iconic dual lands from Alpha, the Volcanic Island. And the rumor that I was told was that Volcanic Island was actually submitted by the artist Mark Poole as a bird in the foreground and a erupting volcano way off in the distance, but with a giant bird in the center of the frame. And that required you, as you mentioned before, that you had to create out of thin air a card to match the picture. Ironically, the best card in green for like the next decade or longer, and still played to this day in a million formats where it's legal. The Bird of Paradise, of course. But that Volcanic Island, there wasn't enough time to commission a new art piece for Volcanic Island to get it into the set. Is that what actually happened? Or was it just an error?
I can verify the part about the art. The art came to me and I said, it was one of the few cards which I said, no, that's not going to work. We can use the art, but that can't be, because that's not a picture of an island, that's a picture of a bird.
Right.
And so I made, on the spur of the moment, Birds of Paradise. And so, yeah, it did not get much playtest. The part about the Volcanic Island not getting in there, I don't know whether that was a clerical error or whether they didn't have the piece in time. It could have been either. It seems like it would be a coincidence for it to be, in addition, there was an error. But I don't know,
It is interesting because, as you might recall, the Circle Protection Black is also missing from Alpha.
Yeah.
And it does not have an associated story related to a piece of art that was commissioned and then obviously wrong and appropriated to another card that you had to design. So I'm tilting in the direction of potentially clerical error, that Volcanic Island may have been painted by Alpha and it was just left off alongside Cop Black.
Yeah, and these could be related also in that, back in the day, there weren't that many people and they were overworked, and so it might have been that there was, you've got these pieces of art already put in, and this other one is just in a different pile, and gets forgotten. So it could be related, right? Like the reason why it was that one which was substituted was just got the piles messed up, right?
Gotcha.
But yeah, the part about the bird of paradise, that's true.
That is accurate. Yeah, a lot of these stories kind of combine over time, as we've noticed, which is really interesting. Of all the cards to leave out, too, why Volcanic Island? It's so good. It just sucks that there are no alpha volcanic islands. So the population of those is just artificially small compared to all the other black bordered duels, which is so cool. On the subject of emissions and changes and so on, another rumor that I have heard relates to the fact that alpha's frames are different from all the other frames of Magic that have ever been printed since, that the corners are more rounded than every other Magic card. The rumor that I heard about that was that despite all of the care and preparation and development in both the art and the mechanics that went into creating alpha, that everybody kind of forgot about physical parameters of the cards themselves. That when it was finally time to print the set up and to cut it into cards, everyone's like, wait a minute, how big are they supposed to be? Are they supposed to be rectangular? Are they supposed to be rounded corners? Are they supposed to be circles? And at the time, Cartamundi's, its main gig was producing casino cards for casinos in Europe and stuff, Macau or whatever. And so they just simply went with the cutting tools that they had to cut casino cards. And that's why alpha has those proportions. So I'm curious to know, is that rumor true? Or was there some other decision in advance of what alpha would look like?
There was definitely, there was not, as far as I know, there was no decision that it would have, that the corner sizes would change. I know that I would have said I want rounded corners. Right, we were not going to have square corners. That wouldn't have been considered. But I wasn't sophisticated enough to know the difference between the corners. I was never asked. I never gave it any thought. I actually was told at some point something which I imagine must not be true. Which was that the reason why they were different is because the plates wear away over time, and this was close to the end of the wear. So that strikes me as being ridiculous.
That seems ridiculous to me too.
At the time, I didn't give it much thought and believed it. So yeah, I don't know. The short answer is I don't know why we ended up with the corner differentiation.
All right, the rumor that I relayed to you came from Peter Atkinson. So probably pretty accurate. He actually what he said to me was that it was only at Cartamundi where they figured out, wait a minute, if they're going to be shuffling these cards a lot, they are going to need to have rounded corners. You obviously can't shuffle cards that have square corners. They just break and snap and stuff. So that they figured it out at Cartamundi. But the fact that you knew that in advance makes perfect sense. You have tons of experience shuffling decks of cards together over the years.
Yeah, I would be surprised if I didn't say I wanted rounded corners, but if nobody ever asked me, maybe I didn't. I know that I was sent lots of card stock and was testing it, and a lot of the times, the people at Wizards were saying, "Oh, this card stock's really good," and I say, "No, that's too thick." And I gave them what we called the bend test. I said, "You have to be able to pick up the card, bend it together, and unflex it, and not have a crease." And so they would do that to this card, and there's a crease in the middle. And so if it failed the bend test, it was off the table.
That blue core paper I learned so much about in a recent interview with a guy named Spencer who is producing his own card game. They actually developed their own core called Orange Core to try to differentiate from the fact that because blue core paper has become so established in the entire global card production ecosystem, you don't know what kind you're getting, and there's a lot of lower quality versions of it. So you might be getting the blue core paper, but you're not actually really getting the stuff that Magic cards are made out of.
I see.
Which is pretty interesting. On the subject of sort of just craftsmanship, another rumor was that right before Arabian Nights was going to press, the plan was to make the backs of the cards pink instead of brown, and that the game was going to be called Magic: Arabian Nights instead of Magic: The Gathering. That the expansion would actually be indicated on the back of the card, and that the pink back matches the pink foil color of the Arabian Nights booster packs. That was the original intention, and it took a late night panicked call from a group of players in Texas, I think, out to Belgium to try to talk them out of this madness at the last minute. Is that true?
I don't know about the late night panic call. Certainly would be possible. And I would describe it as purple rather than pink. But
I guess it is more purple. Yeah, it's true.
But the big picture is yes, 100%. And I was the bad guy there. I wanted different card backs, but my heart was in the right place. So
what was the reason? Why were you so insistent on it?
Well, first of all, we had tested Magic for 2 years, and even and when it was published, the people who had been testing it for 2 years were still playing it, and the cards came out, and they switched to that, and they started playing it. So I knew that Magic was robust. Yeah. Arabian Nights had comparatively not been play tested at all. I mean, it had some play testing, but it was very little. So I didn't know whether it was going to stand up the way that Magic did. I did not want people to feel obligated to buy it. I felt like you have Magic, and now if you make them the same card back, suddenly you've got this whole other thing. Your collection is incomplete unless you get this. But if we make it a different product, then you can shuffle it in and play it. And basically your opponent would know, oh, you're playing with the expansion. And they could say, I don't want to play with the expansion.
So that was intentional, right? Where people pointed that out. They said that, oh, that's a bug, right? That's an obvious problem. Because if the card backs are different, I can just look at your hand and be like, well, that's an Arabian Night card. And that, or his whole card is Arabian Nights. And I know that Counterspell doesn't exist in Arabian Nights. So I have free reign to play this thing. So people view that as a bug, but you're like, no, this is a feature of it. The main thing I was after was making it so that people didn't feel like they had to get the expansion. And I felt like if you made it so that it's the same card back, they will feel obligated to incorporate that into the play environment. That will become the de facto play environment. And it's untested, hasn't had this length of testing. And I didn't like what that said to the players, as I don't want them to feel like they're on a treadmill, that we put out cards and that we make a mistake and we suddenly the entire game's bad. But by giving it a different card back, we sort of insulate that. We could have it so people had this authority to say, I don't want to play with those, or I do want to play with those. And that the cost as far as players being able to see what cards are coming up, I didn't like that, but it was worth it. Collateral damage.
Yeah. And Peter didn't agree with me, but he was going to go with me. And I felt pretty strongly about that. But it was basically last minute. Might have been these panic calls, I don't know. But I reversed myself and decided to go with the same card back. And it was clearly the right move, even though my worries, I think, were not groundless.
How different is the game if that decision reverses, I wonder? I really wonder how different Magic evolves and whether or not it kills it.
It might have
killed it.
I don't think so. I think at worst it would have made the card sleeve industry bigger.
I had a question about the sleeve thing. When did you first see your first sleeve Magic card? And you're like, oh my God, people are putting them in sleeves. What does that mean?
It was very early. So the other thing is that this tied into we viewed at the beginning that we were going to print these cards, and then we were going to print Ice Age was at one point the next expansion. So it was going to go Magic the Gathering, then Magic : Ice Age, then Magic : Mirage, and then that was so a new chapter was going to be a new environment of 300 cards.
Gotcha.
And those were going to have different card backs. And they were going to be standalone.
I mean, that would make more sense. But then the first expansion was, in fact, Arabian Nights. When did you guys pivot away from the idea of making just standalone block?
At that point.
Yeah, I
at
mean,
that
there were
point.
lots of expansions before Ice Age came out. A whole
Yeah,
bunch,
no,
like 7 or something, 8.
is basically retailers and players and wizards really were desperate to put out more cards and desperate to have more cards in the environment, and that's where Arabian Nights came from. And Peter really had to twist my arm. Will you do this for us? And I was all these reasons why I was hesitant made me hesitant, made me resistant. But the lure of designing new cards and sort of having more fun with this and being able to explore the Magic palette in a different way with Arabian Nights was too great for me, and so I jumped in and had a great time doing it and really enjoyed the process of designing Arabian Nights, and the decision to make them the same card back was sort of the last step on the way to what we ended up with, which was small expansions punctuated by big expansions that were all meant to be compatible. And that was putting, like, there were some real problems with that as well, which we anticipated, and I was really worried about, which was the more cards. If you come out with Ice Age and have it stand alone, it's going to be as good as Magic. It's going to be better because we've had more time we can balance it to the sort of games people like and so forth. But right. You take, and we're better at making cards and so forth, but you take it and you mix it with Magic. Now, suddenly, all the cards which you're designing have to compete with all the old Magic cards.
Right. It obsolesces tons of things immediately.
Right. And so there was and this is where, of course, eventually Type 2 came in, where you could only play for cards with the last couple years,
right?
And that was a hard sell. Standard. That was a hard sell. That was something we had to, but it was really necessary. And one of the reasons, even though this was forefront in my mind when, even as far back as Arabian Nights. This was really driven home that we were really in this world when Ice Age came out, and one of the earliest things I read about it was there's one card in Ice Age worth anything. Everything else is trash, right? And it's like this environment of Ice Age had as much playtest as Magic, more, because it had been playtested all that time. And the conclusion to this one player was that sort through it all, this is the card. This one might have a little bit of merit. And you can't, this is unsustainable. You can't make a 300 card expansion and have people sorting through because there's one card which is going to affect their deck. It has to stand on its own. And so that's why I wanted different card backs. And once we got rid of those, that's what led us on this road to Standard.
To Standard. It's so interesting. Yeah, it makes perfect sense how that idea would lead to the Standard format once all the card backs are the same. You need that division. It's so ironic too, right? You talked about how you have years of game development experience that would make the cards from Ice Age naturally more powerful and dynamic. And in fact, compared to Alpha, Ice Age is like a limited set.
Right.
It's like everything is so much weaker on average.
Yeah, that's because of
one card.
Right.
There's one card in there that's a bit of an outlier, but
yeah. I forget what it was, but yeah, and it's natural because we, this goes back to the point is like we knew that the stuff in the original set was balanced for people who didn't know what they were doing and who weren't going to get many cards. Ice Age was balanced differently. It was balanced for people who were going to get a lot of cards and were more sophisticated. And that makes it, that means that that if you're going to mix them, well, if you want to win, you're going to play mostly with the old cards.
Yeah, undoubtedly. I had a couple of questions about your just sort of reflecting on those years of game design, those first few years. If there were any cards that kind of came to the surface that you regret that you made, cards that you designed that didn't turn out the way that you wanted, didn't comport with your vision, or wound up being too format warping, too abusive, too strong. Do you have a little subset of anything that you worked on that you wish you could take back?
Some examples could probably come up. When people ask me that question, usually they're thinking about the Black Lotuses and the Moxes, which are, as we've already established, absolutely not in that category.
I'm not thinking of that.
Usually the cards I want to change are the ones that were too complicated for what they did. You like in the original set, like things like Illusionary Mask and Raging River. When they start getting down into microfont and it's not even really worth the effect that it comes out, those are my biggest regrets. Right, the ones where people get them and their eyes glaze over before they finish reading it. They can't really understand what's going on. And as we became better card designers, we realized that wasn't necessary to get a lot of play value as well. And so, yeah, most of my regrets are card effects that are too complicated and too hard to understand.
Makes sense. Yeah, I remember a specific quote that was attributed to you, that the card Word of Command was buggier than a high school Fortran class.
I don't remember that, but I'll take credit.
No, it certainly it definitely tracks. It would be cool to explore the opposite of this. I was wondering if you have a top 5 favorite Magic cards of all time. And it can cut off wherever kind of your knowledge base ends, wherever that terminates. And I was thinking we could kind of do it as a bit of a lightning round, where maybe you start and I have the advantage of foresight here, but we go back and forth. And it doesn't have to be in any particular order, but I'd like 5 cards that either you designed them or you just loved playing with them and really admired the design that someone else had come up with.
Sure.
All right. Why don't you start? Go number 1.
Scheherazade.
Tell me about the card. Yeah.
Scheherazade is Arabian Nights, and it is not legal in any format, as far as I know.
It is legal in one format. There are variations of old school format where you can play with 4 copies of Scheherazade. So,
with Scheherazade, what I like about it is that it's very meta. I like meta designs. It makes it so that when you play Scheherazade, you play a sub game of Magic with the same decks, and the loser of the sub game loses half their life in the over game. I like this card because it again is very meta, and it also reflected the role of Scheherazade in the Arabian Nights in a way I liked a lot.
Yeah,
and Scheherazade, she was forestalling her death by telling the Sultan stories which never ended. And one of her techniques was to tell stories within stories within stories. So this really tickled me, this idea of playing games within games within games. And one of the side notes to Scheherazade is that you can actually make a killer Scheherazade deck with all planes and Scheherazades. And the way it works, you can throw in some Mox pearls if you want it to move a little faster. The way it works is when you play Scheherazade, you start a subgame.
Right.
And when you play Scheherazade, you start a subgame. And when you play Scheherazade, you start a subgame. And if they're playing with a 60-card deck, you need a 65-card deck or whatever. And then in like the 5th or 6th subgame, that's when they run out of cards. And you deck them. You go to the overgame. Now you play another game. You deck them again. You go to the overgame. You deck them again. So after, I forget what it is, 8 iterations of having your life, you always round down. That's when you lose the sub game.
Right.
Anyway, when you tot up all the math, it's like you have to play something like 50,000 games before this deck wins. But as long as you're winning over half your games by decking, then you're going to do fine.
Yeah, it seems like, honestly, in that situation, you'd be much more likely to win via opponent just conceding.
Oh, yeah.
Out of grief.
Oh, yeah, you think so?
Yeah. I mean, I've had Scheherazade played against me in a tournament. I'm like, what do I even do? It's weird, right? Because fundamentally, if you think about the card mechanically, it's not good in the sense that playing with 4 copies of a card that takes you to a subgame where you are not by any measure favored. There's nothing to guarantee that you're favored in the subgame, but you've made your deck weaker by playing 4 copies of a card that involves playing a subgame.
No, that's why I'm not sure about whether you can make a deck which makes this work with where you're limited to 4. But if you can play enough that your deck size becomes an issue, then you
Right,
can
exactly.
get an advantage.
And it is the ultimate test of your opponent's patience. Eventually, they wind up just taking a gargantuan amount of damage because they don't want to play the subgames, which is often the correct response. You're like, okay, fine, I just concede. I take 10. I don't care. Let's just play the regular game. All right, my favorite card is something we were sort of quietly discussing in the background a few minutes ago. The best card in Ice Age, the best black card ever printed, probably when measured against the entire arc of the game. You could make an argument for Yawgmoth's Will, for Demonic Tutor. There's a few other candidates for sure, but Necropotence, just the embodiment of the card to me was just sort of skill incarnate. This idea that you wager your life points with unknown information. You have to set aside life in advance of seeing any of the cards that you're drawing, which means to really use the card to maximum effect, you have to predict the future. You have to predict the way that the board state is going to evolve over the next couple of turns. How much life can I afford to wager? Because generally the correct response is not to just draw up to 7. It's usually to draw 10 cards or 11 or 12 or 13. And so I love the fact that the card is just so powerful as a combo engine, as a card advantage engine, and even as an aggro engine. This thing that works in so many different strategies and really allows a player to leverage their skill and experience in a game of Magic. All right, your second card, go.
I should say Necropotence is a really, that's a great answer and one that I should put on my queue of favorite cards. Also because just of the great stories in Magic, there's more about Necropotence than probably any other card.
Probably, yeah. I agree, actually. Considering just how long it's been a factor for. I mean, the card was printed in 1995. Famously, according to, I think it was Inquest magazine, said that it was the worst card in the set, famously. That's odd. Either way, here we are 31 years later. I have Necropotence in almost every single commander deck that I built, and it's a force of nature in every format where it's legal.
Force of Nature, there's a good card.
Oh, yes.
So my second is going to be Sleight of Mind, Magical Hack, which I will bundle together. These are cards which one of them changes the color word on a card. The other,
the land type.
The other, the land type.
Yeah.
And this gets into my thing with liking meta cards. This is changing the text on another card. They never really did as much as I wanted them to do, but they promised a lot and gave us something to aspire for, because they have this sort of, when they work, they have this sort of aha, you can get something that you didn't realize you could get by changing the nature of the cards your opponent was playing or that you're playing.
Yeah, it leads to some crazy counterplay, essentially, too. Particularly because Alpha contains all of these land hosers, these mass land hosers like Flash Fires and Tsunami and stuff. Your opponent playing mono green is like, I'm going to tsunami you. Destroy 8 of your islands, and you pay 1 blue mana, destroy all their forests instead. Pretty sick interactions. I'm not surprised you love the card. My second favorite is quite a bit more straightforward. And by the way, I think you can use Necropotence as one of your 5. You're more than welcome to.
Okay.
My second favorite card is the card Mana Drain, printed in Legends. I would actually love to know, assuming you know about and had a role in creating that card, how the hell did Mana Drain come to be?
I did not have a role in it, so
Really?
so I won't say. So I can't say. I don't know whether that was done by the Legends guys or whether that was done by R&D, because R&D did a lot of editing to the set, and there's a good chance that it was done by both. Like they had this card Mana Drain that didn't quite work, and R&D tinkered with it. But there was there were a lot of interesting creative ways to do counterspells back in the day, and it was a fun area to explore.
I remember opening up Legends for the first time. I was in Santa Cruz when Legends came out, and I don't know how many cases of Legends this store got in Santa Cruz, but they were being rationed. You got 2 packs or something. And fortunately for me, the store happened to receive boxes of Legends that contained Mana Drain, because half of the Legends boxes famously did not have Mana Drain. There were 2 different uncommon cycles, basically, which I'm sure was inadvertent. So the store had Mana Drain. I remember seeing someone showed it to me out of a pack. I did not get one, even though it was uncommon. And I looked at it and I went, how can this be a real card? This is so insane. Because Counterspell was already a decent tool in Control. I had already been playing Control decks with Counterspell for a while, and I'm looking at this card like, wait a minute, this just means I can just mana drain their 3 mana thing or their Urnamshin and just play a tome for 0 or mind twist them or do whatever. The card was so unbelievably nuts. And it marked this real demarcation. Control was already the best archetype by far. And it went from being S tier to like S plus 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 tier. It's just what is your opponent even supposed to do against 2 untapped blue mana? Given all of the different things that a control deck can do to you, if you just feed them 3 or 4 colorless mana on their turn, the card was so bananas. And it's restricted in all the modern old school formats. You're only allowed to play with 1. So even though you're allowed to play with that old card set, every single modern old school format restricts mana drain. And every time it comes up, just a single copy, it's incredibly impactful. On top of that, in Commander format, mana drain is galactic in power level as well. You can often just win a game by casting Mystical Tutor, which allows you to take an instant and put it on top of your library, and you reveal it. So you show your opponent, hey, I have mana drain in my hand now. What are you going to do? From that point onward, they can't do anything. They just pass over and over, discarding cards instead of playing because they're so afraid of this effect. So I've been leveraging and using mana drain for more than 30 years now. It is definitely my second favorite card. All right, number 3. Do you want to say Necro?
No,
Okay.
I was actually had a Counterspell on my list, and it is not there. It is not there for power, and this is probably the only one I'm putting up which I didn't design, which is not because I don't like other people's designs, but because I just know them better.
Right.
But Memory Lapse, that was a Counterspell. I think it cost 1 and a blue, and it puts the spell on top of the other person's deck.
From Homelands, right? A real sleeper in that set.
It was from Homelands, and I just loved that card, and it was because, again, it's not power. I had a lot of complaints about it, but just it to me it showed some of the danger of the power creep, like that you could get such really interesting play out of a card like this, where it's not only Counterspell because you're countering it this turn, but it's something where you know what their draw is next time.
Right.
And there's so many ways to leverage that by milling the top of their deck or by just getting yourself in a better situation. Like there are things which are good to Memory Lapse, and it's kind of offensive that of course you'll Counterspell it rather than Memory Lapse it, but Memory Lapse has such interesting play, and also it was so simple, right? It was just it was exactly the opposite of these Raging Rivers and Words of Commands, where you read it and you didn't know what was going on. Here it was simple to read and had some really interesting consequences.
Yeah, it's one of those things actually where it's particularly punishing against good players. A lot of time good players will play bait spells. And so they're in a bad situation. They play a card as a bait spell, trying to get a counterspell out of your hand or whatever, and you Memory Lapse it back on top of their library. Now they have to draw the bad card again. And so they're further away from their potential solution by nature of the fact that they thought that they were going to get a counterspell out of your hand. I would just to sort of add to the conversation, although it came a little bit later, but I love for very much the same reasons the card Remand, which is mechanically similar to Memory Lapse. They're both kind of more... They're cheap. They cost 1 blue in a generic, and they are very tempo-oriented counterspells. Memory Lapse doesn't get rid of the problem unless you have a secondary way to do it, but that's not why you play the card. It's all about tempo, and Remand returns the card to their hand, and it's a cantrip. Draw a card off of it. So you can not only just make crazy tempo plays that disrupt your opponent and cycle your own deck, but you can do crazy things with the stack where you play a spell, your opponent responds by trying to Memory Lapse it, and you remand your own spell. And so you bypass their counter, you draw a card, you get card advantage, and you still have the thing that they were trying to counter in the first place.
That's marvelous. I don't know Remand.
Yeah, it's such an amazing card, and it does totally unbelievably insane things in formats with Storm, where you have a card that adds 1 million copies of itself to the stack, and so you add all the copies, and then you remand the original and play it again, and it storms the second time. So it's nuts. But I did not put Remand in my top 5 pantheon. My third favorite card is another card from Alpha, actually, the Hypnotic Specter. A card that every time I put it into play, and it's so good, I've literally played it in Commander formats before. measured against the best cards ever made, all the way up to the present. That 2/2 flying creature for 3 mana with random discard is such an outlier. It's such a powerhouse. Was Hypnotic Specter did it loom large over the battlefield during your testing? Or did it seem like there were enough ways to deal with it that you didn't think it was that great?
No, we liked it. I don't know if it was in the explosive top area. We were mostly in playtesting playing limited, of course, which makes it so that the information is much noisier. But we liked it. There was a lot of disagreement among my playtesters as to how much discard and how much mana destruction should be a part of the game.
Right.
And so this is one of the represented features. I was firmly in the camp that I wanted both those things in the game because some people hated them. I wanted mechanics people loved and hated rather than ones that everybody. I didn't want to make the game one where everybody won with a creature deck with a little bit of spells as a spice. I wanted just spell decks. I wanted land destruction. I wanted discard, all to be big parts of the game.
Yeah, I mean, it's, I think, honestly, a brilliant decision. I'm in full agreement about that. Again, give the spikes what they want. Give the spikes what they want to play an abusive, crazy deck with Sinkhole and Ice Storm and Specters and whatever else, right? Another card that sort of came to mind as we were talking about that I'm sure you got endless complaints about both in development and later is the card Black Vise. And I'm sure you had a lot of long conversations about Black Vise. It's not in my top 5, but I actually would like to bring it up a little bit.
Yeah, that was one of my favorites. I really liked it. I liked the art. I liked the effect. It was pretty common in the early days. Like you would see it in a lot of decks that were pretty good.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it just seemed like unbelievably oppressive, particularly in a format or as people are learning the game and nobody even knows how much land to put in a deck. As you said, there are people that thought a basic land was better than Alpha Black Lotus, right? And so you put out a Black Vise and 7 turns later, the guy's just dead. He's just discarded a bunch of times. He's like, I'm stuck on 2 land. I can't do anything. 1 mana deal 21 seems like a pretty good deal. And yet, I mean, it was restricted for a while, and yet, the card is clearly, once you really understand the game on a high level, it's very balanced. It actually turns out to be fair. It's there's so much brilliant. How did you guys pull this off? Richard, are you some kind of alien? Honestly, I've got to know. Like Magic is just this incomparable stroke of genius. It's one thing to kind of iterate and take other people's ideas and copy them and perfect them and so on, through a long protracted development process. But being first at anything is really hard. And being at first at something this unbelievably unique and transformational, it really defies belief. It's really, really unbelievably incredible. Just beyond inspired. So,
well,
bravo.
Thank you. No, it's been a lot of fun to get that all these exciting things about games were able to come together into this package, and that I found an audience that loves it. So,
I'd like another card name. Do you have a number 4 card on your list? Number
4, Goblin Sharpshooter.
So cool.
That was one of my later designs. And I mean, I've been in design groups since then, but I remember getting just really being excited by it. Was originally Goblin Gatling Gunner, but they didn't want to have any guns in the game. Although the picture still is a Gatling. Yeah. He does. I wanted the name Gatling Gunner, but
I see.
Yeah, so Goblin Gatling Gunner, Goblin Sharpshooter was, I think it was a 1/1, and you tap it to do a point of damage, but you untap it whenever any creature dies.
Right.
And so you can go mow down lines of level 1 people, and when you had a combat, you could finish off ones that were close, and it just had a really good feel. It was one of these things where it wasn't too complicated. You didn't have to go to microprint, but reflected very well this sort of effect I was after.
Yeah, the puzzle solving in the middle of combat, right, is the thing. I'm reminded when you were talking about it, a card popped into my head from a different game that you have certainly played, the game Hearthstone. And I'm sure in your time playing Hearthstone, you probably either played with or played against the card Defile.
It's been a while. How does Defile go?
It's very, very similar to Goblin Sharpshooter, actually, or Goblin Gatling Gunner. 2 mana in Warlock, basically. It's a Warlock card, and it says Defile deals 1 point of damage to everything in play. And then if anything dies, it repeats. And so you could create these situations, and particularly because you can sculpt your damage in Hearthstone by directing attacks at their creatures, where you go, that one's got 1, that's got 2, I'm going to deal 3 to this thing. And then you go Defile, boom, 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 boom. And it blows up everything in play for 2 mana. And it's so satisfying.
That is exactly tapping into what I liked with the Goblin Gatling Gunner.
Yes, so such a cool and unique effect. It is played in tons of formats. I was watching a very, very popular kind of almost emergent format right now called pre-modern that a lot of people have been gravitating towards. And pre-modern lands in this really interesting space. I actually don't know the exact era, but it's an era where fetch lands exist. The fetch lands were, I believe, printed in the very early 2000s. But there are no shock lands or revised dual lands available. So it's after revised dual lands, but pre-shock lands. And so you have fetch lands that only get basic lands, which is a really strange thing. And Sharpshooter is all over the place in that format. It's a really, it's like a very, very powerful silver bullet kind of toolbox effects that a lot of decks run, particularly decks that have the ability to tutor for it, usually via a green enchantment called Survival of the Fittest. Fourth card for me, a card that I actually was very much associated with back in the 1990s. The card is Disrupting Scepter. And to me, Disrupting Scepter it's one of those kind of light bulb cards where when people start playing Magic, and I'm sure you encounter this a lot of the time, a person would look at the card Millstone and they would look at the card Disrupting Scepter and they would look at Millstone and go, wait, this is 2 mana to cast. And for just 2 mana, you can make them take the 2 top cards off their library and put them in the graveyard. 2 mana to do that. That's amazing. Disrupting Scepter taps and the opponent chooses and discards a card from their hand. And it costs 3 to cast and 3 to activate. That's obviously way worse than Millstone. Millstone's 2 cards for 2 mana. Disrupting Scepter is just 1. Oh, and they get to choose. The Millstone's even random. They might mill their Shivan Dragon. And yet once you begin to understand the game and you use Disrupting Scepter or you get destroyed by it, and you realize that there's this interesting thing going on, something that you guys clearly picked up in your alpha testing, is that extra cards drawn are in most cases interchangeable with extra cards destroyed. And so the fact that you could leverage a Disrupting Scepter to create an invincible game state, an invincible board state, where your opponent was completely mathematically eliminated from the game in a way that you couldn't generally sculpt in any other situation, really made me love the card. And it also, as a control player, your ability to kind of do threat assessment moment by moment as a game of Magic evolves is highly predicated on the variables, mostly how many cards do they have in their hand. And if you can reduce the number of cards in their hand from 5, 6, 7, whatever, all the way down to 0, you have perfect information to evaluate everything. And the fact that the Disrupting Scepter sort of singularly allowed you to get into those board states, allowed you to play a control deck at absolute pinnacle level of skill, made it my, 4th favorite card of all time.
That's a good one.
What is the 5th one, Richard? What's your 5th favorite card?
I've got 2 5th ones because one of them occurred to me while you were just talking, and it really would be nice to get another card that I didn't design. And so Millstone would be that one.
Who made it?
It was in the Ice Age group, so I don't know who in it did it, but I loved Millstone because in my original design there was a deck. Running out of cards was a thing,
right?
But it wasn't something that I explored in the strategy. And to have this simple, elegant thing, which is again very simple, and just pushes you to think about that as part of your game strategy. Is, I don't know, it was just marvelous. It felt really good playing with it, even though it didn't, as if you did it casually, it wasn't actually going to do anything for you. Right. And it felt very flexible because sometimes you want things in your discard pile, sometimes you want to try to deck the opponent. But the one that I actually had for my 5th was the Lord of the Pit.
Lord of the Pit.
And the reason, one of the reasons for that is because in playtest, I ran Lord of the Pit in a lot of decks. And again, we were playing very limited, so that was often not a choice of mine other than the fact that I had access to it. But at one point, so Lord of the Pit, huge creature, but if you don't sacrifice a creature to it every turn, it'll attack you. Scaff at one point was telling me that Lord of the Pit was terrible, that I shouldn't play with it. And I was saying, no, I've gotten a lot of good victories out of it. And he said, really? Name one. And I said, well, just recently I said I was playing this game and the other person, the Lord of the Pit was out there and he had to control magic and he had to control it. And then it ended up killing him because he didn't have any creatures. And so Scaff thought that was terrific. He said, so your justification for playing Lord of the Pit is because somebody might be stupid enough to take control of it from you. Also,
that's awesome, though. That's such a good story.
Also, I love, there's a variation of Magic that I played, which I like a lot, which is called the backdraft, where you try to draft the worst decks possible.
Yeah.
And in the very first backdraft, Lord of the Pit featured into that, where I drafted the only creature in my deck was Lord of the Pit. So
that is such a troll from the person who drafted the deck for you. I can't remember, does it? I know Demonic Hordes taps, and you can't use it if you don't pay the black mana. Can Lord of the Pit, you take 7 during your upkeep, but can you still attack with it? I know you can with Force of Nature. I don't remember if Lord of the Pit actually taps if you don't feed it a monster. It would make sense that it probably does tap.
It would make sense that it taps. I don't remember, but I would imagine it's parallel to Force of Nature. So if Force of Nature doesn't tap, probably it doesn't either.
All right, I'm looking him up right here. He is in my old school cube, although he was a recent addition. Yeah, you may still attack with Lord of the Pit.
Yeah, he just wants blood.
Yeah, and more importantly, he cannot be sacrificed to himself. So exactly, you take the 7 damage before you get to attack, which usually doesn't work out in your favor, unless you're far ahead. I think it's an excellent choice. Talk about flavor incarnate, right? Regardless of you don't care about the upkeep. 7/7 trampling for 7 mana.
Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. All right, my 5th and final card is a card that you are unlikely. Or that you're unlikely to be familiar with because it was printed kind of quietly a number of years ago. The card is called Liquimetal Torque. It's a 2-mana artifact, so it's a mana rock, tap for a generic mana. But it has this secondary ability that is so subtle and yet so elegant and powerful, particularly in the format where I play it, which is the Commander format, that it leads to all of these crazy, wild interactions. You can tap it to turn any permanent in play into an artifact. So that's its other ability. Tap to make 1 generic mana, tap to turn any card into an artifact. Think of the possibilities of what that
that's speaking my language. That gets back to the magical hack and sleight of mind. Totally. I love the meta effects. That's a meta effect where it's changing the nature of the cards, and it's just like that opens up all this possibility.
Totally. You're playing, I don't know, blue-red. You have no ability to kill enchantments, and your opponent plays some ridiculous enchantment against you. And you draw Liquimetal Torque, or you draw the card Dak Faden, and you already have Liquimetal Torque in play. Dak Faden allows you to steal an artifact as its Planeswalker ability. So you're just like, all right, I'm going to make your 8-mana enchantment into an artifact and take it with Dak Faden. Now I own it in a blue-red deck, right? It constantly, it gives mono-green decks, mono-blue decks, mono-white decks, all of this interaction that they normally would not have. That's so awesome. And so that's, to
Marvelous.
me, it's like simplicity and elegance and power all combined for just 2 mana. Such an awesome card. All right. So on the subject of top 5 lists, we hinted at this before. I am curious to know what the favorites are. It's not even top 5 favorites, but the favorites among your favorites are among games, and whether that's digital games, board games, card games, etc. When you think of the games that you have talked about to your friends over and over again, that every time you go back and revisit them and go, man, I really do love this game. I'm going to spend another month playing it. What are your what's in your top 5, Richard Garfield?
Well, that's a really hard question because putting these things into lists is just so tough. But among my top 5,
doesn't need to be ranked. Yeah, just go.
Among my top 5 would be poker. I adore poker. I've played endless amounts of poker. I haven't played recently, but it's just such and I like it because it's a elegant, not only an elegant game, which really has mathematics and psychology, but it's also it's a modular game. It's easy to modify and open-ended. It's just marvelous. I will use Dungeons and Dragons as a stand-in for role playing. Dungeons and Dragons is not actually my favorite role playing game, but I don't want to call out anyone in particular there.
Yeah,
so
I mean, it was the first, right? The first
it's the OG.
Like
So I'm going to put that out there.
Totally fair.
Cosmic Encounter was formative for me and just showed me a lot of what was possible with emergent gameplay. Let's see, Go. I hate to lean too heavily on the non-proprietary historical games, but Go is just next level. It's just so easy to learn the rules, but so much going on.
Yeah.
And let's go. Get one digital game in there. Quadradius.
Quadradius. Tell me about it.
Oh well, we should play. It's amazing. Okay. It's a game. It's like a web game. The designer moved on from it, but it's on some sites now. You can actually play it. The basic structure of it is that you have some checkers on the board. I have some checkers on the board, and we have to capture all the other person's checkers, and then power-ups appear. When you land on a power-up, you get this special power which your opponent doesn't know. That's essentially it. But there, as soon as you begin playing, you begin to understand how much randomness, strategy, bluffing is all available, and it's very accessible, and it's just I don't know, it's just the crazy situations come up. It's a really wonderful game.
When is it a relatively new thing?
No, it's old.
It's old.
I think late 90s, maybe early aughts. And it disappeared for a long time, but yeah, recently it's been up. You can track it down. You'd be doing your audience a favor if you found it and put a link in.
You've gotten me excited. I have talked many times in the past about games that were transformational to me, recommended by you, specifically Dream Quest and everything associated with that. Honestly, this has been again, surreal conversation. It's been such an honor to reflect and talk about the nostalgia and just to listen to your unbelievable breadth of wisdom and experience, exhilarating. And somehow 2 hours and 15 minutes have flown by. All good things must come to an end for now. But I have a million more questions and topics I'd love to explore. So if you'd be so kind, I'd love for you to join me on the channel again at a later date, and we can kind of pick up where we left off.
Sure. Be happy to. It's always fun talking games and
beyond.
Talking games with you in particular.
It has been, yes, I share that sentiment completely. It has been a profound pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me today, Richard. And I will see you as soon as possible.
Okay, great.
All right, thank you. I would love your feedback on this series. If you're enjoying the videos, please give me a thumbs up. If there's games you think I might have missed, let me know and I will get to them. See you for the next one.